Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Redgate WebEx. We're going to be doing a WebEx on how we can help complement your development process and also hopefully look at some of the new recently added features, show you a little bit on how we can help you manage your estate capacity, patching, and distribution. So my name is James King. I'm the enterprise account manager at Redgate. I've been here for a little over 8 years now. As it says in the slide, I specialize in SQL monitoring and DLM. The reality is I kind of really specialize in SQL monitoring, and DLM is obviously a big part of what we do at Redgate. So I kind of add that on as well. So those that don't know, there's about 300 of us here, or 18 years old. I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but I think the thing that's kind of really interesting for me, and I only really thought about recently, was the fact that we released 1,100 product releases last year. So I think that's really interesting because it just goes to show we kind of practice what we preach. We're a DevOps based tool company. We release frequently. Monitor itself, we've released every year a major version, and then we're releasing every Tuesday pretty much new features and things. And most of those features come from conversations with you guys as our customers. So, a lot of what we do is take the feedback, see how we can put it into our agile dev practice and just improve the tool on a regular basis and try and get that value out to you quicker rather than having to wait for, every 6 months or every year, however long it is. A lot of people tend to wait until they release stuff. So, yeah. The other thing as well, Redgate, we kind of cover everything within the SQL ecosystem. So, we kind of have this vision of being this compliant DevOps company. So, compliant DevOps being the new buzzwords around here. But, we want to be able to kind of cover everything from this release cycle across the top there, your CI, CD, and then right the way through to monitoring, backing that up, and provisioning again to start the whole process over. Obviously, today we're going to look at the monitoring and optimizing, but I think on the whole, the theme that runs through all this is kind of automating all those mundane tasks that you don't really want to do on a regular basis, but need to be done, and trying to make it easier and quicker for you to do these jobs so you've got more time free to go and do the more interesting stuff like projects and, whatever else you kind of want to put your mind to. So, as I said, not many slides there. I really want to show you the tool itself, as that's what this is all about. Hopefully, a few of you are familiar with this, but I think for anyone who's not, I think the goal of today is to kind of show you through the whole thing, focusing on these areas where it's going to help with your releases and also the new features as well, which is up in this estate tab up here, which we'll get to in a bit. Just a couple of caveats before we start. I'm not actually a DBA, as I said. I'm a sales guy in effect. Hopefully not too much of a sales guy, but I know the tool. I think you guys will understand a lot of these things better than I. So when it comes to the point of throwing questions at me at the end, please don't be offended if I don't know the answer. I will always come back when I've spoken to someone. I like to think I know most of the tool, but as I said, you've probably got a better context on it than I have. Secondly, this is a test system. So this is actually our monitor.redgate.com live demo. So everyone's got access to this from the general public. As a result, though, these are actually live systems. So this is covering our SQL Server Central and SimpleTalk backend databases and instances. And then we've also got some testing stuff. So we've got a couple of Azure DBs here as well, and we've got some internal test systems. So I guess the reason I'm mentioning this is because sometimes I find the data can be a little bit boring. We are working on trying to get some more interesting stuff into the systems. But it just means that things are a little bit sort of lighter than I'd expect in a real world environment. And for example, if I was demoing this on your sim, there's probably a lot more interesting things that can be there. So anyway, I want to show you some things as I go through and some things we're working on as well. Cool. So I'm just going to jump straight into this with, as I said, this is SQL Monitor. This is our overview landing page. What we're looking at here is 18 instances that we're monitoring. We've got a 2-node cluster at the top here in our production, which is covering our SQL Server Central. And we've got a few alerts here. I mean, one of the things with Redgate is, or one of the things with monitoring is to kind of tell you about what's happening and give you an overview of your estate. So this is only 18 instances. If I had hundreds, and believe me, monitor scales to thousands in theory, you can actually display this as smaller tiles, and there is other views in the pipeline that will enable you to see a bit more of an overview across an even larger estate. Also, this is only on my Microsoft Surface, so it's quite a small screen, but if you imagine this up on a 60-inch screen in an office, then you can actually see a bit more information, a bit more of the instances there as well. You may have noticed while I was just talking, actually something just moved there. So at the moment, I've got it in a dynamic view, which will order things by severity. So if, for example, one of these had an alert that came up as like a high or a medium level warning, it will actually float to the top of the group. So this one here on the left-hand side has got the highest level alert, which is why it's on the left. And equally, as I said, if this one was to get the highest level alert, it would move up to the left-hand side here. Good when you've got a small number of servers, but equally, I found with hundreds of instances that might be a bit difficult because everything's all moving around the screen. So you can choose to order by name as well, and you can also choose to search up here as if you want to look for a particular server. So again, if I'm looking for SSC, I can get everything with that. If I go with N2, then that's going to pull up just the one I'm looking for. I'm not going to stick too much on this screen, but I mean, one more thing I would just point out is on the right-hand side, this is quite useful. You can see your latest alerts over the last 24 hours here, quite a few deadlocks. But if I wanted to just check stuff over lunch when I've been away, then I can see for the last hour, I've got 12 deadlocks and a few blocking processes, and I can jump straight into these from here. I'm not going to do it just yet because I'm going to show you some stuff before I get to that point. So one of the important things with the tool is there's a problem, you've identified that, you want to actually go in and have a look at what's been occurring. We've been working on this very recently. I mean, when I say recently, I say today we've been trying to set up some good demo information to show you what's been occurring when, for example, a change has been made. It's actually just come off the screen here, so I'm just going to go back a few hours to see what was occurring earlier in the day. Here we go. So a colleague of mine, Matt, who's a pre-sales engineer, ran some scripts to cause this spike over on the left-hand side for the CPU. The idea is actually what we're going to have it as is a regular deployment. So we're going to deploy something, make some changes, see the spike, and then we're going to make the change roll back. And then obviously you're going to see that drop off. We haven't quite got to finishing that yet, so you're going to have to use a little bit of your imagination. But I also want to use this as an opportunity to show you how we can actually identify what the problem is and maybe how we can rectify it. So this window along the right-hand side here actually shows us what's going on within that period of time. So if I'm going to move this over to here, to the spike, just to see what was occurring. So I'm covering both ends of the spike up and the drop down again. And you can see here the CPU and memory and weights and disk I/O for this point in time. So I can actually do a bit more detail up here as well. I could just look at, for example, CPU. I can add baselines to this as well, see if this is normal behavior. So if I've got a baseline for CPU, which is giving me the average of the last 7 periods, which is 24 hours in this case, because that's what I've got over here. You can see actually this machine being a box has, as I said, with a bit more detail here, I can actually narrow this up a little bit more and just kind of really focus in on these 2 points. Everything within this window is now what shows beneath. I could also look and see if this is at a VM level as well. So the VM host is represented by this dotted line, and then I've got the machine and the SQL level. So this is obviously a problem happening at the SQL layer rather than just a process. or an application running that's maybe kind of chewing up this CPU. I can also see quite a large jump in my weights here as well. So the resource weights has gone up. And if I come down here, I can see my top queries that are occurring. So again, anyone who's used SQL Monitor in the past knows that one of the things we only ever used to show was the top 10. So the top 10 queries and the top 10 weights and the top 10 queries affected by the top 10 weights. One of the things we've actually changed is we actually show up to the top 50 queries. It's only showing 24 because I think there's only 24 queries actually on this particular instance. But the idea is obviously you can scroll out a little bit further than the maximum number of it's set to 25. See, it's executing quite a large number of times. It's got obviously a much higher duration than the rest of it. I can also see, there's quite a lot of reads and logical reads here. And if I actually click on this, what it's going to give me is the query details, so the query text. If I share full query here, it's not the most interesting query in the world. It's only fairly small. Again, we've kind of set it for demo purposes. Everything that's actually underlined as well, I'll show you some more interesting stuff on a different node in a second, but everything's underlined here is a tool we've integrated into SQL Monitor called SQL Code Guard. And the idea is it shows you where there's maybe areas of best practice hasn't been followed. So this is saying this is unparsed SQL, for example. If you had a select star without any sort of more details, it's going to highlight that, for example, as well. Also below here, it shows me any weights. So I've got a few weights here in the wait time, the program name and login name that it's running from. So again, it's the administrator that's running this query. I can also have a look at the query history. So we've added this sort of fairly recently in the last 9 months or so now. And what it's doing is it's given us, if I show you from the Zoom, and what I mean by that is it gives us the idea of if something has changed over a period of time, it's going to give me the information to be able to make a decision as to whether something's happened to this and what's occurred. Over the history there, it's obviously a bit patchy, but for example, this is showing us the previous execution and a plan change here, and then it's also jumping up with the duration and the actual executions per minute. So before the plan change, it was right down here. We have a plan change, and at that point, it's actually jumped right up. So if I click on this, it will give me some information around the actual query plan itself. As I said, really simple query here, and it's actually given me the warnings as a missing index. So what's actually happened here is someone's removed the index and enabled this query to kind of actually bloat and cause issues. And then at this point, they've added index back, and it's it's all gone back to normal. So bear with me a second. Someone's asked a question. I'm just going to pop this out. Change from top 10 queries. Does that need to be set somewhere? So Angeline Marin, just to let you know, no, that doesn't need to be changed. You just need to update to the latest version. I think we're on 8.0.14. I think you're on 8.0.3 by the look of it. So again, guys, as I mentioned, we update regularly and we're always adding new features. It's always worth just having a look and seeing what's new. Actually, that's a very good point. What's new, there's a little box up here which now tells us what has been added in the latest version. So you can see here V12, 8.0.12. You can now filter, group, and sort the data on this page, as well as exporting data to Excel. So there's a little release notes box just up here on the right-hand side. I'm going to come out of this test one because, as I said, it's a little bit patchy at the moment on this particular instance, and just show you a bit more information actually on one of our SQL Server Central nodes, because they're actually production and they're generally a little bit more going on. So I'm going to jump into this one here and just see what's been occurring on this particular instance. So when I mentioned again about the deployments, one of the things if you've got SQL tool belts in your estate is you'll notice either by DLM automation, so through the automated DevOps, or just through compare or even source control, we actually annotate automatically the graph at the top here. And again, the idea is if in the previous example I was giving you, someone made a change and they deployed that, or a deployment went through the automated process, and let's say it didn't quite hit production, but maybe pre-production environment, and suddenly you be able to see that maybe this is a good place to go and start. Someone's changed something, a new version's been released, check the release notes, see what's occurring. And again, I could take this window and I could narrow that down and say, what were the queries that have occurred at this point in time, see if any query plan changed, and get into a bit more detail. The other thing as well here is you'll notice all these dots. For those that haven't seen SQL Monitor, these dots, they actually denote where there's been an alert. So everything within this window is up here on the right-hand side. I'm looking at just today, but I can go back as far as the information I'm collecting. So I've got about 2 weeks worth of data here. If, for example, someone said something was running slow yesterday morning, and I come back to here, I can see an awful lot of alerts. So there's 192 just in this small window. And actually, looking at a 24-hour period might be a little bit too much for this. So if I want to look at, let's say, an hour window, and for 9 o'clock yesterday morning, I might be able to sort of break out those deadlocks in a bit more detail and see what's going on there. So I can narrow this right up as much as I can. So it's giving me almost a 9-minute window, and I can take that across to here. So it's a 15-minute window, sorry. And I can see all these deadlocks on the right-hand side. Coming down further, I'll come to the actual alerts themselves in a minute. Hopefully I've kind of covered off the queries themselves. I mean, again, if I click into this, I can open up the actual query data for all history for this particular query. That's not giving me any data to display. I can also show the full query text and also jump into the query plans for all of these as well. This one's a bit more obviously an interesting query and how it plans out, but you can also click on these to give you things like the properties of the query, any outputs, jump to particularly expensive operations or data-heavy operations, and I can also look at the query text up here. You can also export this and download this. Sorry, if you want to look in some of the other tools out there, sort of Query Plan Explorer, for example, and take this offline. So that's also useful to know. As I said, as well as the top queries, we've also got the top 10 weights, which in turn, if I open these up, will give me not only sort of the built-in expertise around what we're looking at, but also give me any affected queries. So actually, there's not many affected queries in this window. Again, it's a very narrow 15-minute window, so that's not really much of a surprise. But it also gives me, again, the execution over time of that query. So the whole idea is if, over time, my query is actually growing in time and duration, or even executions, maybe I can spot that a little bit early and just see what's going on and try and reverse some of that negative trend. Sorry. So, other than that, what else do we show you? I'm not going to read through all these. I think that would bore you half to death, but also you can come and have a look at it if you want. One thing I will just point out, we'll come to in a moment, is this server properties on the right-hand side. We've done a bit more of that in this estate view up here. I'll come to that in a bit. But some of the other useful things here we have are stuff around things like blocking processes. So this is fairly new. I think this has actually been in since version 8, but it might be slightly later than that. I kind of lose track, to be honest, on these things. Not a particularly interesting blocking process. I wonder if there's any more interesting ones that we've collected in the time period. Probably not. No, my luck. Nope. Okay, the idea is, effectively, if I was looking at, for example, a blocking process that has occurred in a point in time, it would give me a bit more of expect to see a bit more of a tree here. So if there was more to show you, I'd actually open this out and it would show you sort of a triage as it's coming out. But the important thing is here, if I click on any of the boxes, it gives me the SQL command on the right hand side. Things like, again, the login name and the total blocking time. I mean, this is actually a minuscule blocking process, so I'm surprised I even bothered showing it. But um, again, this window will give me this insight into what's happening. Actually, I wonder if I jump back to today, have a look at the 24-hour period, if I can get something a bit more interesting to show you here. If not, I do apologize. It's the nature of using live data on a bit of a boring test system here. Here we go. So we've got a few more blockers. See if any of these are a bit more interesting. Okay, slightly more so. Okay, we've got the head blocker here. We've got the SPID 124, which is the one that's being blocked, the actual wait time, and then the subsequent blocks there as well. One of the things actually we've had as feedback, and I'm trying to get sorted, I'm just going to address this one, is it'd be really useful to be able to see the query plans here. So yeah, we are working on that, I believe. I can't promise that, but hopefully that'll be something we add in the not too distant future. CPU on the user processes. We also show stuff around availability groups. So again, depending on whether you have or haven't got this technology, we have this available. Again, really boring sort of data because it's a test system. But the idea is it will show you anything that's kind of failing. So if your data is falling behind, for example, your redo queue is growing and your send queue is growing, we will alert you to this sort of information. We will show you any transaction delays, an issue, what's synchronized, what's asynchronous. So, there's a lot of useful stuff that's also highlighted in the alerts that will tell you if stuff's going wrong, which is obviously and queries or top 50 queries are going to be stuff that you see on a regular basis. I mean, my insert into stats cache is always going to be here. What you might want to be more interested in is having, sorry, I think my audio just dropped off there. I was just saying you might want to be a bit more interested with regards to actually what's happening at database level as well. So further down towards the bottom, I can jump to it using this on the left-hand side. You can actually see my databases. I could search for databases here, and I can actually jump into one of them, and I can see what's occurring at a database level as well. So I've got information such as database size, transactions, whether it's online, but I've also got this stuff here around the database file size. So I've got this file size, the current size at the moment, how much of it is used, what the autogrowth is set at, and what it's going to be, the time taken until that's full. So the reason we've got this here is, again, people have used this previously. We used to just show the current size, but not how much space is used. Obviously not useful if you suddenly hit a period of auto growth right in the middle of, a heavy transaction point in your day. So this is 5 years till full. I've got some cool alerts I'll show you in just a second, which will just give you an idea of, how you can damage control and how you can look at things going forward in the future. And as I promised as well, you've got the top queries here at database level, and you can show up to the top 50 here too. So you can kind of dive just a little bit further in, a little bit further down, and get that granularity, hopefully that would help you get to the root cause of any problems and performance issues. Cool. So hopefully I've just kind of given you an idea, to give you an overview when people are making deployments against your databases and your systems, how it's going to affect things. This little feature here, as I mentioned, is a toolbar feature. So you do have to have toolbars in your environment, but it's definitely worth looking at this or playing with this if you haven't done so already. So the other thing I kind of wanted to show you, which is fairly new, again, we added this fairly recently, is, well, actually two features which are fairly recent in the alert inbox. So grouping alerts is a big thing. we're finding that people are dealing with bigger and more complex estates and therefore dealing with more alerts and more noise and more issues. Obviously, the downside to having a monitoring system with BF is to kind of give you death by alerts. Overkill is definitely a particular problem with monitoring tools. One of the ways we've combated this is with this ability to group alerts. So we've got about 60,000 alerts on the system. What we've done is grouped it all together, so you can see, how many there are of particular things. So 37,000 of the 60,000 alerts is just for this particular type of deadlock. So this one deadlock is occurring this many times. And actually now, in that particular the most that you can turn on in the configuration tab. So this actually gives a bit more of a graphical representation of how a deadlock's occurring and how it's playing out. I mean, this is a fairly sort of simple one here, but you can kind of get the idea of how exactly this is playing out. And on the right-hand side, things like useful information on the SQL, when it run, the host name, that sort of stuff. We've also still got the output graph here, so we can still do the normal things here, and we can also add comments, such as, this has happened 38,000 times, but it's actually just an application, so there's not really much we're going to do about it. Ignore. We can also see alert history, previous occurrence, and obviously a description of the alert itself. I'm not going to dwell on this too much. I think this is certainly something worth playing with, though, in the sense that this is just a way to reduce the amount that you're going to get hit. Because, as I said before, if I turn this off, you're going to have a line item for every single one of these things, and trying to ascertain which deadlock is which one's the most problematic, or which one is like the 1 in 100 that you actually want to find. This old view just kind of really wasn't going to work. And it also groups other things together, for example, like job duration unusuals. In fact, let's just show you some of these filter things here. So if I look at, let's say, job duration unusual, and just I would filter to hide, but we haven't actually got any. But again, I've got what did I just do there? Sorry, let's do that again. So I've got 60, which is just this particular one, SQL backup, transaction log backup. Have I discovered a bit of a bug here? I might well have done. What's going on there? So this is the problem with multiple deployments. Duration unusual. Let's just have a look here. If I click to this one before it changes, I'll see everything that's going on here. Don't worry, guys. That will be fixed by tomorrow. But yeah, I can see the transaction log backup is occurring on a regular basis. It's a job duration unusual. I really don't care about this. I do not need to know about it. It's only 2 seconds long, but I can see it's deviating quite a reasonable amount. Sorry, it's 2 minutes long. Okay, maybe I do want to know about that. How long does it run over the last number? So yeah, okay. So this jumping up is probably actually a bit more occurring because 9 o'clock is usually when my big backup's happening. So it's probably to do with that. But either way, I really don't care. I don't want to know about this. I don't need this in my inbox 60 times. So I click on configure alert. I can say don't raise this job, or actually, maybe do raise it, but only raise it when it's 10 minutes long or something. Then I want to know about it. So, very easy to jump in and just alter these things up here. I'll probably show you a bit more on configuration in just a second. Makers we're trying to do with monitoring and is really important to us at Redgate is trying to be more proactive. So one of the things that you're doing by actually having a monitoring tool in the first place is being proactive. I can't stress that enough. By actually having something in place and getting alerts, just letting you know things are wrong is really, really good. But the next step we want to take it to is this ability to not just tell you when something's going wrong, but try and alert you to things that are gonna go wrong or something that's gonna cause you problems in the future.
So with this installed versions, you might have a large estate and you might not be aware of every version you're running or what patch has been applied where, have you done this, have you done that? It's very, very difficult to kind of keep an eye on that. So what we've done is this install versions here, which gives us an overview telling us how many of my servers are on which version in the estate. So I've got 15 out of my 18 on SQL Server 2017. I've got a couple that are on 2016, sorry, one on 2016, and I've got 2 on SQL Azure DB. And only these ones are up to date, surprise, surprise. But on this one, none of them are up to date. We've got a new update available as of last month. I can actually download that from here, or I can go into more detail below and actually update individually. So for example, I might just want to do my patching on my staging environment first until I'm happy, and then actually progress that into my production. But we also tell you information that's probably quite useful, such as, when's the end of the mainstream support for this, what version numbers and so on. So quite a lot of information. This is fairly new. I mean, this is kind of still in preview, so we are still taking feedback and we are still kind of adding and tweaking it as we go along. But definitely keen to hear what people think of this. And of course, you can export this and take this to wherever you need to show people that you're up to date on everything, and or not, and maybe you need to put some time into a project to update across the system. And you can also do cool stuff like looking at particular groups. Again, if you've got a large estate, it might be a lot nicer to be able to just see, for example, your production and what's going on there. So as well as the installed versions, we've also got disk usage. And again, this is in the spirit of trying to be able to project what's going on into the future and make decisions in ample time before things become problems. So at the top, we can see here, for example, a view of my disk usage on my entire estate. So how much space is currently used, what my current capacity is, and what we expect to use over the space of the next year. Beneath that, I can go into much more granular detail, so I can look at things like particular disks, particular groups, whether it's just my production stage or test, and I can see things like how much projected space do we expect to use in a year, and in this case, when it's going to exceed its capacity. So this one at the top is going to exceed its capacity in less than 22 days unless we actually do something about that. So I can go and make changes now. I can export this and take this to my boss and say, hey, disk H in my staging environment is going to run out of space. That's going to cause some problems. Can I have some money to go and get what I need hardware-wise to fix this problem? So again, all about just kind of seeing what's going on into the future and helping us make decisions based on that. One of the tweaks we actually made to enable us to keep more data for longer and kind of get these wider views on things is in the configuration tab here. We now also show in data purging, you can do selective purging on different sort of sections. So if I open this up, which we'll do just in a second, you'll be able to see that we've actually separated out the disk usage and storage data, for example, and we can now have this for a longer period of time. And we can also see what is being kept in my backend repository here as well. So, it says we've got 4.98 gigabytes worth of data, and this is how it's broken out into each of these different sections. So data is probably one of the largest areas here, which is why I've only got it for 2 weeks. But if I wanted to keep that for longer or a shorter period of time, I can change that and it will purge all prior data. Thirdly as well, you probably noticed this up in the top right hand corner. This is talking about particular base monitors. We've actually enabled a feature in SQL Monitor to help with scaling. So again, forgive me, I don't know who on the call has got this tool and experienced it in the past, but one of the things we've done a lot of work on is making it more and more scalable. So we did a lot of performance stuff on the back end. Again, like I mentioned, we practice what we preach. We're actually monitoring SQL Monitor using the analysis graph for a long time to kind of see how we could improve things like CPU and memory used over time. And we were tweaking it, enabling us to add more and more service to the system, but we still found there was a ceiling. So what we did was we added the ability to do what we call multiple base monitors. So with this, you can actually add additional base monitors in either different domains or in the same domain, and maybe attach up to, well, I think we can do up to 200 instances per base monitor. And what this means is that all this information is being collected on an individual base monitor, and we've got 3 in this case. We've got 1 in Azure, and then we've got 2 others in some different domains. And all the legwork's done by these base monitors, but in the overview, it's still in one place. So it's still one view here. So this web front end connects to all the multiple base monitors and gives you one pane of glass to look at them through. But it just means that from a security perspective and from a scaling perspective, you can have these different base monitors in different areas collecting the data and presenting them here, and it's completely seamless. Effectively, it doesn't matter which base monitor I'm looking at, I can jump in from there. Another thing I haven't touched on, just I want to kind of briefly go into, is obviously future. Everyone's either thinking about, talking about, looking towards stuff like Azure DB or Azure. Now we've kind of covered the infrastructure as a service for a long time. That's pretty seamless and it works as normal, but we always sort of struggled with this Azure DB and not actually having anything to connect to. But equally, your estate is your estate, and we want to be able to show you that. So in the last 6 months or so, we've been working tweaking on the ability, available to you to see as part of your estate. So information as you'd expect, because we're not, and again, it is a work we're updating on a regular basis. Again, the caveat, the always encourage you to have a look and play in your own environment with that, of course. But again, such as these, the top weight happening within these, or anything in the resources cost money. Bad queries are costing you money. They're literally, you can see your money going down the drain if things aren't tuned correctly. But we're also starting to surface things like, how many DTUs, what version you're on, what sort of stuff. So this is pretty exciting for me, and hopefully, for other people looking at this stuff and want to see that within the fold of their environment too. Sorry, I feel like I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm kind of trying to show you the cool new things and remember them as we're going along. And one of the things I didn't also cover in the alerting here as well is, for anyone who's not familiar, we do a lot of stuff around custom metrics and alerts. Obviously, with data privacy being a big thing at the moment, especially here in the UK. I don't know if anyone's listening from the US, but GDPR is, like, again, the buzzword at the moment. Compliant DevOps, big buzzwords. And as a result, there has been some new things added to the custom metrics website. So the community metrics website here, for those that aren't familiar, it's open to everyone with the tool. You can write your own T-SQL queries. And that means you can actually sort of see, add stuff. Sorry, I think Felix, you having sort of audio things. Louise, is the sound all right?
Hi, James. We haven't lost you entirely, but there are little bits where it sort of cuts in and out. So apologies for that, everyone. I think yeah, if you just keep going, James, and then obviously if we get any more sort of total dropouts, then okay, we'll go from there. But fingers crossed we can make it through to the end.
Okay, sorry guys, obviously flaky BT on the internet here. As I was mentioning, there's this custom community website which gives you the ability to download some of the ones that other people have created. A really cool one we've just added is this GDPR field. Loads of sort of custom queries by one of our partners, Elko Dross. And you can see some cool stuff like, you know, login added to server role, for example. You know, you don't want to see this in your environment, but if I just click on this, it gives me the T-SQL that it's going to use to collect the data. I can install the metric, and then I can start alerting myself on this as well. So I can set the collection frequency, and if I was to add this, what it would do is it give me the, oh, hang on, I'd have to specify all databases here. What this would do is give me an alert then to let me know if someone's added something, and, you know, tell me that that's happened via the alerting channel. The other thing I just wanted to kind of touch on in the last couple of minutes is, if you don't know this already, there is a lot of configuration you can do in alert settings. You can also turn on extended events in the configuration here as well. With the alert settings, just make sure you're aware that you can actually go into you know, quite a large amount of detail here. So, you know, for example, my production servers, I can see, you know, all my different alerts here. I can also drop down into particular things, you know, so I can actually go in and say, at this level, I want to turn off backup overdue for particular backups, or I wanted to turn on database file usage for particular ones. You can really kind of get into detail, and you can get down to a disk level. You can choose particular alerts to happen, whether it's firing them into an SMTP trap or send Slack notifications even. You know, any questions around this stuff, do get in touch, because, you know, we're more than happy to show you and go into this stuff in more detail. Okay, before I completely run out of time or everyone gets fed up with the audio dropping off, is there any questions from anyone from what they've seen, or anything you want to ask? Give people a couple of moments here to ask some questions. Hopefully everyone's still awake. Oh, got a question through there just asking me to show the reports and what's in there. So sure, I'll do that, and obviously if any other questions come in at the same time, please feel free. For those that haven't seen reports, again, this is something that came in version 7, which is a year ago. This just gives the ability to kind of expand on the analysis graph. So, you know, for example, if you wanted to build a report and send it to yourself every morning, or kind of create some sort of custom dash, you can do that within here. So we've got a few example reports. I can build a new report. I can say, this is one for me. I can choose to email this on a schedule, so I could put in you know, a particular recipient such as myself, and I can choose to send data for, let's say, the last day. Actually, I'm going to do the last 7 days, and I'm going to send that to myself daily, apart from the weekends, at 5 in the morning. And then I can start to build up these tiles here with lots of different things. So I can add anything from my analysis graph, such as, you know, machine processor times, any of the custom metrics as well. I can also add from our summary tiles, and these give useful snippets such as longest running queries, logon failures or job failures, or even server summary tiles as well. And when I built these up, sorry, I can't add them because of the demo, but when I built these up, you can have as many tiles here as you want of different sizes and move them around, and then you can choose to sort of jump between different, you know, different sort of instances or different servers to kind of build up different pictures as well. So it's quite a useful thing if you want to send a report to particular people, or just you like having your certain things you look at every morning while you're drinking your cup of coffee. Said it a lot, but have a play, see what it's like in your environment, and just see what kind of cool information you can pull up yourself. Any other questions from anyone? No, it looks like I've kind of covered everything off. Well, I guess the good news is that means you got a few extra minutes of your evening back or morning back, depending on where you are. As I said, you know, this is something that it's just to kind of give you a taster. I would kind of always recommend you to get in touch if you've got any questions or anything you can think of maybe after the you know, after the demo or later today or later next week. Just get in contact. Always happy to talk about this sort of stuff. Hopefully it's been useful. Again, I'm sorry, I kind of jumped all over the place. There was too many exciting things I wanted to show you, and apologies again for the sound. I have no idea what's going on there, but hopefully you managed to at least catch the majority of it. But I really want to thank everyone for taking the time to have a look today at what we've got to offer. Hopefully we will speak to you at some point soon.